viewers. The point of this channel is essentially to make differential work a little bit less intimidating to both DIYers and professional mechanics. I've found multiple guys come in and they'll say things like it's above their pay grade and things like that. They're not capable of it. And it's not true. We're using the same skills. There's only a couple extra things you kind of need to know before you dive into a job like this, but almost anyone's capable of doing it. Tooling otherwise can be a little bit of a struggle. However, there are ways around a lot of the different struggles that you could run into where you don't need the special tools that I have, and you can do this a lot of times. I actually just did a recent one of my personal vehicle in my home shop. So it is possible to do. It's not outside your bounds. It's not above your pay grade. It does take a little bit of skill. There's a reason for that. But what I found is a lot of the reason people seem to think this way is really because nobody's shown them how to do it. Nobody's shown the process. So a lot of it is really just lack of confidence, not lack of knowledge. There are a couple things that a normal mechanic doesn't use all that often, so like measuring tools that take some familiarity to get through. But if you see how it's done, you'll become more confident, is my hope, and hopefully be a little bit less intimidated to take on this task yourself. Not that I don't want your money, obviously, but I think it's nice to spread knowledge. The way I plan to really go about this project is generally, it's basically, I'm just going to go through my work day, essentially recording what I can when I can. It is still my day job, so I can't necessarily do like studio versions. I'm also not the boss there, so I have to keep productivity up. It's it's not going to be like South Main Auto stuff. It's a great channel, by the way. If you're looking for mechanic, type channels, but what it will be is essentially every step of the way, each video, that every step that I go through, including mistakes, problems I run into, and how I solve those problems. A large part of the inspiration for this was because I did a write-up for a buddy of mine, a mechanic buddy of mine. He didn't used to be a mechanic. He was a landscaper for a very long time. He just got into the field a couple years ago, and of course with my well over 10 years of experience, I decided to give him a write-up at one point of how to do a differential rebuild. I really enjoyed doing it, I found. So what I decided to do was, why don't I do these write-ups for anyone who wants to see. Now the write-up I did for him was a little bit more detailed, largely because it was that rear that I did for myself, so it was on my own time. I think through these processes and showing people exactly what goes through my day, what goes on in my day, I think it'll help make things a little bit less intimidating for DIYers, mechanics, anybody that would be interested in trying this sort of project on themselves. And that's where the tricks part comes in. Since I'm going to just be essentially recording everything, I'm going to be including all the problems I run into, whether they be self-imposed or just stuff that you just run into. You're going to see at least one of those that I can remember in this particular video. It's going to happen sometimes, and I'm going to show you how to mitigate those issues as best as I can. And a lot of these tricks are going to be useful in basically any mechanic field, so even if you don't plan to do any differential rebuilds, but you are into repairing your own vehicle or anything like that, a lot of these tricks are going to be useful for you in other fields, suspension work, brakes, steering, even engine work. Some of these things will come in handy. A lot of these tricks will be useful for people in totally different fields. Like, for example, maybe you're a shopwright in a factory, and you have to rebuild, maintain machinery inside that factory. A lot of these tricks are going to come in handy for you if you don't know them already. So I hope you stay tuned to this channel. I want to also apologize for the shoddy camera work. I'm doing my best to figure it out, how to best get good angles and stuff like that. In this video, I happen to know there's a lot of stuff that basically goes unseen because essentially all I'm doing is carrying this camera in my shirt pocket and hoping that it catches everything. It misses a lot. So I've been experimenting with other videos that I've made now, or at least I have the raw footage of. I haven't edited. I apologize for the burp. I'm going to be drinking beer while I edit, to be honest. Anyway, so I've been experimenting with different ways of filming myself doing these things so that hopefully I can give you the best view. I've had light issues with this one because I thought, more light better. Turns out this camera's not very good at light. So a lot of things are blinded by it being just too bright, and I've tried messing with the contrast in the editors, and it just doesn't work. Contrast and sharpness and stuff like that. Now, I'm no video expert. I rebuild differentials for a living. I'm kind of a dip when it comes to that stuff. But I will be trying to experiment and figure things out as I go. What you're seeing me do here is I'm trying to get that track bar out of the way. That's so I can get the differential out. So what I do is I remove one bolt all the way, get it out of there, and you can put the bolt back in the hole once it's out of the way. It's a good way to keep organized. Mechanics do it too. Don't think that it's something we don't do. It's a lot easier than searching through your a bucket of bolts that you've just scattered in or on the ground or whatever. But then you loosen up the other side just a little bit because that clamps down on a metal sleeve on the inside of the bushing. And that's partially why, well, actually I should point out why you loosen it. That's so that you can swing it out of the way. It may, like I said, it might be more beneficial if you're doing it at home to just remove it all the way, but I just swing it out of the way. That's also the reason, though, why you have to tighten these up at ride height. Now, you'll see me tighten it up just because I'm using an impact, and I'm just going to tighten it up real quick. But I do move it over to the alignment rack. I don't think I caught that on video, but I move it over to the alignment rack, loosen it back up, and tighten it back up while it's sitting at ride height over there. The reason you got to do that is because if you tighten it up while the wheels are hanging and then you lower the car down, you're twisting that rubber bushing basically constantly because it's clamped down on that metal inner sleeve, and so once it's clamped down at not ride height, the wheel's hanging, you lower it down and the suspension moves to ride height. Well, now you're twisting that bushing in there, and that's how the car lives. Most of its life is at ride height, so you want to tighten it down there. Well, obviously all I'm doing there is removing the drive shaft, so I do cut it short a little bit, and then you'll see me try to pull out a wrench, and what I try to do is show you that it's a 6-point wrench. I do a very terrible job at it, but it is a 6-point wrench, and this is, actually going to be the first tip. Now, I show you that it's actually not holding much because that bolt, I never touched it, but it's actually weird how these bolts are like that. They very often are just, it's like they're undersized or something. It's the cross pin bolt that allows the cross pin to come out so you can push the axle in, take the C-clips out. You'll see me do that later. But very often those bolts are just ready to strip. So the next thing I try is I take the cap off. Don't do this. I didn't mark it yet. Don't do that. I do have a later video showing you why I was not so careful about it. Because I know how to figure out which way that cap went. I can't get into it here because there's a lot of ways of doing it. So I'd rather, have a whole video about it. But essentially, make sure you mark it before you do that. But to get a socket on, a 6-point socket on, I took the cap off of the one side, and I tried to do it that way. You'll see that doesn't work. And then later, what you're gonna find is I take it's a cross pin from another drive differential that is no longer in use. We collect these things as, obviously a lot of times these things aren't repairable if the housing is damaged, things like that. So we keep a lot of this stuff around, and cross pins are really good punches. But any old punch is going to do the same thing. What you're going to see me do is smack the crap out of the head of the bolt using it as a punch. And what that does is it mushrooms over the top of the bolt. And try to imagine. You have to kind of imagine metal is actually a bit like a really tough clay. It does move. If you hit it hard enough, it'll move. It's malleable. And so as it mushrooms over the top of that, it gives my socket a little bit more metal to grip. This is going to work on most bolts that you find that are just slightly, not totally stripped. Maybe you slipped on it once, and maybe even 5 times, and it's gonna give you a better purchase with your socket to do it that way. If you give it a good smack, it's best to give it enough smacks where you actually have to smack the socket back on instead of just slipping it on. If you can just slip it on, you probably haven't done enough. Give it a few more whacks, and hopefully you'll have mushroomed the top of that bolt over enough to give you a little bit more purchase. Just one of those tricks that I was talking about, Diffs-n-Tricks. You see me, I'm going to put that cross pin back in. That's just to make sure the internals of that differential, the ring gears, not the ring gear, the spider gears, they don't fall out while I manipulate everything else, while I get measurements, everything else. Not a big deal, but it does save you some time. Just like how you guys probably already know, you stick your bolts back in where you can, so that they're there waiting for you when you're ready to put things back together. And then here, you're going to see me cleaning up the housing, and then largely that's because you want to have good purchase with your micrometer there. And the reason you need to do that is because for some, they just want to slip around. So just clean that son bitch up. Even, razor blade, wire wheel, whatever you got, if the silicone that seals these things is causing it to slip, whatever you got to do. But I also brake clean the gears themselves, and that's because the oil likes to cushion. It makes it a little bit harder to read those backlash numbers, because it's just a softer touch. And when the bearings are worn out the way these are going to be, it makes it, the pinion has almost no resistance. And you're probably going to see, I think you see me do the reach around where I give it more friction, but I'm not sure. But you can do that too. You reach around and you just stick your finger on the pinion while you do the backlash reading, and that's going to help you get an accurate reading of before taking it apart. but you'll hear me even say this is way too tight if you listen closely. Um, I think that was about 3 to 4 thou. I was trying to show it. I don't mind that. I don't know it particularly, but it actually also indicated to me what was wrong with this differential. See, it only came in with a bearing noise, but that already told me that it was the right side bearing on the differential, because that if it's worn out, that allows the differential to move to the right, and that allows the backlash to be a little bit too tight. Getting a gear pattern here, it's probably not going to look good. They almost never do, the before patterns, but what you can tell is it's very much off the toe side. Perhaps I should do a video about showing explaining terminology, but the toe side basically means the inside part of the gear, very much off the toe side of the drive side. Yeah, I guess this is more terminology. You'll come to understand this stuff, though. The terminology is easy once you understand it. It's not important. But the pattern was off the edge, and you saw that before. And then on the other side of the gear, it actually doesn't actually look that bad. A lot of times when a bearing goes bad, it'll spin, and it's going to mess up your shims. So what you're seeing here is a bad shim, because the bearing spun and it ruined the shim. That's what that outer roughness is. Most of the time when you run into this situation where a shim has been damaged like this because of a bearing spun, you can just measure that smooth part of the shim, and that's going to give you its real thickness, the thickness it actually was when the factory assembled it, and that'll give you a baseline of how thick you need that side shim to be. For most of you guys, that's probably going to mean you're going to have to use a super shim kit, or what they call a super shim kit, which we don't use basically at all unless we're in a really sticky situation. We don't generally like them. It is possible to use them, and I've seen them used with good luck, as long as you can make sure that everything is perfect. You got to make sure it's super tight when you put that differential back in, and they're just a pain to work with is really the biggest reason we don't use them. It is still doable, it's just not my preferred way, and I happen to be working in a shop that's basically got a collection of these things. Even these ruined ones, what we do is we take them to the back of the shop where I have a surface grinder. I'll grind them a little bit thinner, throw them back in the bucket, and it'll just be a bit of a thinner shim. Now perhaps I might have done this in a bit of a bad order for DIYers, at least, who maybe don't have access to air. It is actually not that difficult to rig up ways to loosen up a pinion nut. There's multiple different ways. I've heard of guys using essentially using the parking brake. I've heard of guys using. It's going to be a bit of a troublesome situation when you go to tighten one back up. Crushing that sleeve can be hard. But you can also, though, just rig up something that holds on to the pinion yoke itself and maybe contacts the ground while you do it with a hand tool, so that as you loosen it up, the pinion's kind of being forced against the ground. That's a possibility that can be used. We actually keep one in the shop because sometimes the air tools aren't strong enough to crush these crush spacers. So we'll have to use our little tool. What we have is, I guess I'll show that in a later video. It's essentially a plate welded to a big ass pole. But the plate's got some holes drilled in it so it can bolt to various different pinion bolt patterns. I guess I never addressed the reason why I've had that nut there. That's so that the pinion doesn't go flying out. Another way you can do this is actually just putting the cover back on. So if the pinion flies out, it's going to hit the cover, it's not going to jump out there, hit the ground, and chip itself, ruining the gear. You could do it that way, and then you don't have to worry about putting the nut back on so much. But if you got to hit that thing hard, I promise you, those pinions will mushroom out on those threads, and the nut keeps it from doing that. This is how I'm knocking out the bearing races, the outer bearing races for the pinion bearings. It's I've got a special tool to avoid it, but eventually you're gonna want to make sure that you haven't put burrs in there. You can do this with any old punch. It's just with any old punch, you're probably gonna put some bigger burrs on there. And if you put bigger burrs on there, it's a little bit more work to get rid of them. Essentially what you're going to have to do, I think we'll get to that, but essentially we're going to be talking about putting a chamfer on the outer edge of the bearing seats, I guess you would call that. But yeah, that's all this is. You could do this with any old punch if you had to. If you were forced to and you're really determined, you don't need this punch. It's just really helpful for productivity, really. Like most of my tools are really just for productivity, rather than it's not possible without them. It is possible. Also, fuck, I do hate these torque arms. They get in the way. I'm just using a nice sharp chisel, and I don't feel like explaining what a chamfer is, so I'm just going to tell you, Google it if you don't know. But I think if you don't know, you maybe shouldn't be taking on this project. But I'm just trying to put a chamfer on that gets rid of all the burrs that I may have left with using my punch. However, I should also mention, I do this every time, because a lot of times I'll know for a fact I didn't leave no burrs, and I'm only hitting in 2 different spots, and I'll find burrs in places where I wasn't hitting, and I'll find burrs where I know I didn't leave no burrs. It's always a good idea to do this, because a tiny burr, we're talking about thousandths of an inch here, you know, it can make a big difference in how that rear sets up.